All right, guys, I'm here today with the Avantis from Allen Heath, and we're trying to update the firmware. It's been giving us issues with starting up, and I think it needs a firmware update, and it'll fix some of those issues. But I'm scared to do it because the last time we updated the firmware, it got rid of so many things. Like, I think it saved some scenes, but it didn't exactly work the way we wanted it to as far as the internal routing. A lot of stuff was missing, so we had to rebuild a lot of things. That's why we're doing it on a Monday. We just got done with service yesterday, so we have a whole week to get things right in case something goes wrong. But we're gonna try to do a better job this time than we did last time. So we've already gone and downloaded the firmware from the Allen Heath website, and we've got the latest firmware. Now, one thing we didn't do right last time is you always need to unzip it, right? So we have the zip file here, and then the folder is what you want to drag onto a completely blank USB drive in order for it to work right. Last time we just copied the zip file onto the flash drive and it wouldn't recognize it. So it has to be unzipped, but just in this folder and on a thumb drive by itself, and it should work. But before we do that, I need to come over here and figure out how to save these settings onto an external storage device and make sure that we have everything that we need. Otherwise, we may have to do a lot of rebuilding. So that's what we're working on today. Okay, so I've done a little bit of messing around, and I think I figured out that earlier we may have been, on previous updates, we may have been trying to store just the scenes, but the scenes themselves are stored within the show, and these top few are just some default shows. And then today I've kind of done some tests, and I think I've got everything stored on these. In fact, I think this one, ChristTab 2023, would be the one that I actually want. But before I update the firmware, I was trying to make sure I have all of our settings saved. That's something that's very important. The last time we did it, we had to rebuild almost everything, and it was very tedious and time consuming and took a lot of work, and it was very frustrating. So this time, all we did was to store a new scene, you just hit store, or to overwrite the scene that you're on, you just hit overwrite. So that's basically what we had to do. And what I'll do, I'll show you how it works. For instance, so I want to hit recall for ChristTab 2023 because this has all of our scenes saved. To do this, you hit recall. Now, the scary message pops up that says, this will overwrite all current settings. Continue. So it's just talking about, it's just going to pull up all of those settings for that particular show. So we'll hit yes. And then it'll go through this process of loading. Okay, so now it's pulled up. And if we go to our scenes, I can tell that this is indeed the current show. Okay, this is the show that we wanted. Christ Tabernacle 2023 is the show that we're on. So it did that. And the other thing is, when we did this in the past, I believe what we didn't do was overwrite. So overwrite is a process that will overwrite all show settings. So no, we don't want to do this right now, but I just did this. And basically, some settings are stored locally on the soundboard, and this may have been where we went wrong last time, is we didn't store the show. We might have copied the show, but until you overwrite onto the show files, it doesn't store everything. So that may have been where we went wrong last time. So this time, we stored everything, and then I'm gonna copy these last two settings over to the USB, this one and this one, and now they're on the USB. I'll save those onto my computer to have backup, and then when we reload the firmware, we can load those back in, and that should be all we needed to do. The other thing that seems to be important in a firmware update for your USB device is to actually erase it first. So just get a USB drive that you don't care about, or you don't have any files on there that you need, right? So in this particular one, I don't have any files on here that I need, so I'm actually gonna erase it. So on a Mac computer, you go to Disk Utility, you can search for it up in the top right hand side of your screen, and then up here you just hit erase, and we'll just call it USB, and you can do different formats. This one is fine, so I'll just use this format. Hit erase. It'll take 2 seconds. Erasing, done, and then it'll remount it, and we'll hit done. All right, so now we're gonna go to my downloads folder, which is where I have the Allen Heath Avantis. This is the firmware folder. I'm just gonna drag this into my USB and copy it over. And there we go, it's copying. As soon as that's done, we're good to go. It's loading, and there we go, it's good to go. You don't wanna rename anything on here. You just eject it and put it directly into the Avantis, and you're good to go. All right, then you grab your USB drive. There's a little port way down here. You just stick it in. Okay, we're back for round 3. I think something happened when I had previously downloaded a firmware 6 months ago or so, and so when it downloaded, the folder actually said Allen Heath Avantis 2 by default. It kind of just added a number, and I think that was messing with it. So I changed it to that, copied that folder into a new thumb drive, then stuck it in. And this time, this is what it should say when you go under utilities, firmware, and then it says update. Before, the update was grayed out, or it would say missing firmware. So this time, I think we're ready for it. So we'll just hit update. Warning, updating firmware resets parameters and preferences. If you want to keep your current settings, then please save these as a user show first, which we did. We saved it as a user show, so hopefully all of our preferences are saved. Updating firmware does not delete user shows or profiles. So we'll continue, yes. And then we'll wait and see what happens. It'll probably restart. Firmware found, press update to continue. We're on currently 1.21 is the current one. We're updating to 1.25. That's what we're doing. 2023 summer. That's where we are right now. Definitely some stuff happening. It's going through this checklist. Firmware updated successfully. Your console will restart shortly. 3 seconds. Here we go. Let's see what happens. Okay, so when it loaded, this is what happened. Looks like it's nice and blank, right? Which might seem scary at first. What if we go to utility, memory? If we load this one, this is our show that we saved everything to. So I'm gonna hit recall. This will override all current settings. Yes, that would be great. In this case, we want it to override. Sounds like something's happening. Probably should turn our amps off when we do that. Show recalling, please wait. This looks promising though. Faders are in about the right spot. Now we can kind of tab through. Let's go to the one that we use CT 2023, and we'll hit go. That is our Sunday morning preset. And I have a microphone here to do a little test. Vocal 1, check 1, 2. That's a good sign. Okay. One thing that we had big issues with last time was our in-ear monitors and the monitoring. So we'll probably go through and test some of that today, but this all looks good. It looks exactly how it should be. So I believe that is how the firmware update is done. I just realized I never did a final video for firmware update, but I went through with my music intern and we checked all the monitors. The thing that we had a big issue with last time was the monitor mixes were just gone. Like there was nothing there. So we had to rebuild everything from scratch. Not just the mixes, but the actual routing. So we had to rebuild the routing, the buses themselves. It was just a nightmare. So this time we just decided to check everything before we get to a service. You know, we did it on a Monday just in case things went badly, but thankfully everything worked. And I think the big takeaway is make sure you save the show. The show contains all of the stuff. And I think last time we might have copied the show to a USB, but we didn't necessarily save it first. So it had some of the stuff, according to some of the research that I did, some of the information as far as like the routing and stuff is stored locally on the console, but not necessarily in the show until you save it, right? So if you don't save it to a particular show, some of it might just be there by default kind of in the background, but if you save it, it'll put it all in one place, all the information in the show. So save it first and then copy it to a thumb drive just in case. I didn't even actually have to use the thumb drive this time around. I just saved it to the show, and it says that it doesn't overwrite anything to do with the show. But what I think happened last time is we didn't save the show first. So those are some of my takeaways for the firmware update. It's always a little bit scary because you don't know if you're going to lose anything, but I think we've figured out how to make sure our settings are saved for now, at least for this particular soundboard. And every soundboard's different, so there's probably a different way to do it for each sound console. But for the Avantis, this is the way that it works. And also, it looks like it did fix the startup issue. We started it up a couple times, and it started up the first try every time, which is great. That was a big issue with why we had to change and upgrade the firmware, because you would start it like 5 to 10 times sometimes before it would actually turn on. It was just awful. There was one Sunday we almost didn't we almost weren't able to use it. I don't know what we would have done, but finally, like the 15th time, it actually loaded and we were able to have practice in church. But that could have been really bad. So that's why I was really looking forward to getting this firmware updated. So hopefully that fixes it for good. And yeah, other than that, the Avantis is a great soundboard. So hopefully you learned something today. Thanks for watching.